I'm Mary Lou Aleskie, the director of the Hopkins Center, and it has been just such an honor, and I want to thank Janet Eilber, the artistic director of Martha Graham Company, who I'm here with tonight for a beautiful week of building performances for you that are completely sold out, and you might actually be able to cut a deal for yourself if you're willing to sell back your ticket, but I would tell you it's probably not worth it. Okay? So the company's been with us for almost a week. We have been the beneficiaries of master classes and visits from schools from around the region. And most importantly, we have been rehearsing together with our Dartmouth Symphony Orchestra members, some students, some alums, and some of the people in our community who we like to think of as community coaches who sit in on the orchestra to fill out performances. And it has been just a really beautiful collaboration from what we can see. And Janet and I are going to talk a little bit about Martha Graham and music in just a little moment. But as artistic director of a company as famous as the Martha Graham Company, one of your really tough jobs, Janet, is to think about legacy all the time and to think about it in a contemporary context. And there are a number of works on the program that do just that. But this year offered you an opportunity to think in a very different way about the legacy, given a historic moment in our country. Do you want to talk a little bit about the Eve Project and how it relates to that kind of work that you're thinking about?
Right. As part of our thinking on legacy, it really, we've focused on, in the last decade or so, how to curate our core collection of Martha Graham masterworks. We've experimented with a variety of ways to give audiences more access, from using narration and media on stage to doing contextual programming, chronological programming, unusual partnerships with universities, with musical ensembles. The most infamous, maybe, is our 2-week residency at Google. A lot of different experimentation. Our social media is substantial. And one of the projects, the main part of this curation has been the commissioning of new work, as you'll see on the program. Artists of today's generation in conversation with the masterworks of Graham, and they reflect on each other. Graham's masterworks give a historical context to the new works, and the new works bring fresh eyes and a contemporary conversation to Martha Graham's work. It's really a 1 + 1 makes 3. But we wanted to start out with one of our crazy auxiliary programming ideas, audience access ideas. The Eve Project has been a season theme for 2 years. This is part of our contextualization of Graham's work. We wanted to focus on the revolutionary way Martha presented women on stage, creating anti-heroines in some cases, complex, rich, flawed, powerful women. We wanted to focus on that, and we wanted to work with some of today's top choreographers who happen to be female. So that's what you'll see on the program tonight, and that's the essence of the Eve Project. The Eve Project is rolling us up into the celebration of the 19th Amendment next August, women's right to vote. So this auxiliary project that we did, that I'm hoping you'll participate in, take a little bit of Martha Graham home with you today, is called the 19 Poses for the 19th Amendment. And I've chosen 19 photos of Martha Graham in performance in different poses. And we have been offering this up as a creative project to anyone who's interested. So tonight, we'd just like to teach you the first 7 poses. You can remain seated. They're basically arm gestured, but it will be much better if you all stand up. So especially those students in the back. We're just going to teach you these 7 poses, and then you'll have them for life. You can do whatever you want with them. We have a little follow-along film here. There it is. Okay, are we ready?
Well, thank you all for being such great sports, and thank you, Janet, for letting us feel a little bit of Martha's life. You know, one of the things that is such a joy about having you all here is we've actually had an opportunity to work together in, I think, 4 different cities where I was working as a presenter. And one of the things that I always felt was really important in dance was looking for opportunities for companies to have live music. And of course, we have such a great musical community here, so it was immediately evident that the Graham Company should come. And I think a lot of people think of all of Martha's innovations, but don't really know how responsible she was for so much contemporary music. And in fact, 20th century contemporary music would be a lot thinner in terms of the canon if it weren't for Martha. And of course, tonight we start, here's a spoiler alert. Appalachian Spring is at the top of the program, and if you leave after that, you will miss a lot. So, and a lot musically as well. So, Janet, talk a little bit about Martha and her commitment to having live music and commissioning so much music.
Yeah, she, Martha, as many of the early moderns were influenced by a man named Louis Horst. Louis Horst was Martha's first musical director, and he came with her out of the Denishon company, which was a very early dance company, sort of before the Graham Revolution. Louis was a modernist, and he took Martha to things like the first exhibit of abstract art, European abstract art, in the Chicago Institute in 1923. And she saw it, and she said she was so relieved to know that she wasn't crazy, that other people thought the way she thought. And Louis insisted that Martha approach music differently than most choreographers. He said, your statement is most important. You really should have your ideas and your design for the dance before you add the music. And the music should frame and support your ideas, which really lent itself to commissioning music rather than getting this whole thing done and then going, well, I better go find something that matches it. And she worked with commissioned music for over 4 decades. The big push that allowed it all to happen was in the early 40s. The Elizabeth Sprague Coolidge Foundation, which is based at the Library of Congress, agreed to commission music for Martha. Several commissions, Appalachian Spring is one of them. This, for modern dance, was a huge validation. This was a young art form that people were a little confused by, intimidated by, whatever. It was an art form that got a lot of momentum by aligning itself with the social political aspects of America in the 30s, but then it got this push into being recognized as an art form by these commissions by the Library of Congress.
Yeah, and a word about Elizabeth Sprague Coolidge, too. We think of feminism today, we think of feminism in the mid-20th century, but Elizabeth Sprague Coolidge actually was a pianist who didn't get to perform very much, but she married well, and she used most of her resources to commission music and was always very interested in supporting women. So the fact that Martha found support from the Coolidge Foundation is really fitting and significant. So, and you know, not to deviate too far from music, and we'll go back to it again, but also talking about contemporary art and Martha's awareness of contemporary art, the set for Appalachian Spring is quite famously a work of Isamu Noguchi, and you know, many of us know his work now and his museum and portions of the collection at MoMA. And so it wasn't just the music, it was costumes, it was set scenery.
Everything. You know, Martha, people think of Martha, I think there's sort of this general reputation as sort of this diva dictator who said, I want this and I want that. But it was quite the contrary. She was so collaborative. She was so smart, I think, to be working with these young artists who would become, you know, just mega artists of the 20th century, Copeland and Barber and Hindemith and Menotti. And so she was, and her dancers, she was Merce Cunningham and Eric Hawkins and, you know, really the pioneers of modern dance started in Martha's company. And she had a brain trust that she understood her work could only be enriched by if she relied on these collaborators as thoroughly as she did. So we have the Noguchi collaboration. Again, we'll take a few detours here. Appalachian Spring premiered in 1944. Martha hired Noguchi, you know, a few months before that, and hired a new young dancer, Yuriko, for the company for Appalachian Spring. Both of these Japanese-American people had been in internment camps just a few months before. And there was a movement in the arts to hire Japanese artists and to make a statement by the progressive artists. And Leonard Bernstein did the same thing. But you'll see in the Noguchi set that he and Martha were very simpatico in terms of trying to strip things down to their essences, to just give the audience as much as it takes to allow their imagination to create the whole thing. And the Appalachian Spring set is a perfect example of that because it's the outline of a house. A rocking chair on half of a porch, one wall, beams that jut out into space. And it's to evoke this sort of intimate space on the frontier as we, the audience, look into that house. But it also evokes the vastness of the frontier that's out over the audience head. And you'll see as the dancers enter, they're looking out above you, they're checking out the frontier. So the playing space is not just on the stage. And Noguchi set helps the playing space extend out through the walls of the theater.
And the set also, bringing it back to the music, the set evokes a kind of shaker-like decor. And of course, it's a gift to be simple is a recurring theme in the work. But she didn't give very much direction to Aaron Copland in creating the work. He seemed to be interested in the atmosphere, but was...
Well, she actually sent him several scripts with descriptions of scenes and the characters, and all of which she changed once she got the music. But they had we're fortunate because he was in California, he was working in Hollywood on a film score. She was in Bennington and in New York City. So there's a huge paper trail of their collaboration, and you can see all of the things they considered. they wanted to make an American statement. They considered it to be their contribution to the war effort, to talk about the essences of the American frontier mentality, determination, optimism. And these letters have everything in it from Hart Crane, Harper's Ferry. At one point, Martha had on stage a stage on top of the stage and a reenactment of part of Uncle Tom's Cabin. They talked about the Puritans and the Quakers and the Shakers and all, American religion was huge. They talked about a fugitive, a John Brown-like figure. It was American primitive painting, which Appalachian Spring evokes in a way also. You'll see that Martha freezes time during the dance, and much of the cast is in a tableau while one dancer comes forward and you see what they're thinking, the bride's innermost thoughts, or the preacher delivers a sermon. Sorry, I'm veering wildly over
it's
this,
okay.
but-
I'd be curious to know, can you raise your hand if you've seen Appalachian Spring live? So it's still new for some folks. That's fantastic. That's really wonderful. We have at least one other iconic work on the program, Diversion of Angels. You want to talk a little bit about that and the music? Because again, it's about contemporary images coming together.
Diversion of Angels is going to close our program, and the music is composed by a young composer at the time. I think he was about 30, Norman Della Gioia. And Martha, when she went to that Chicago Institute exhibit of European abstract painting, she saw Kandinsky and was shook to her core. I think she saw a Kandinsky that had a slash of red through it, and she said, someday I'm going to make a dance like that. And Diversion of Angels is the dance with the slash of red that crosses the stage. So I want you to look for that. It's a dance that's all about love. It's an abstract work. There are 3 couples in it, the couple in yellow, the couple in red, and the couple in white. And it's 3 different types of love: the mercurial, adolescent, teenage love of the couple in yellow, more lyrical, passionate love of the couple in red, more spiritual, mature, enduring love of the couple in white. I'm going to say this all again because I'll do a little bit of an introduction from the stage, but I think one of the things to look for in Diversion of Angels is that Martha wanted to create a world without gravity. There's no plumb line, or there actually is a plumb line. As the curtain goes up, you'll see the couple in white, and they are absolutely upright. But then the men come in head first. This was also part of her desire to, she said she wanted like a Chagall painting where the characters kind of float in head first. The men come in head first, then the women come in head first, and then they're back, and then they're front. There's a big sideways tilt. The lady in red crosses the stage. So just note how the dancing, the plumb line of the dancing is this world that's just drunk with love. And the geometric patterns on the stage are worth, imagine yourself as a sky cam for some of it, because she's constantly turning parallel or diagonal lines into circles and into parallelograms, and people are in and out and up and down. So that's my advice.
Very beautiful. And then a new work based on some little-known pieces. Pam Tanowitz, who our audience would be familiar with, who was here with Simone Dinnerstein and doing her Bach dances, Goldberg Variations, last year? I can't remember. Earlier this year? I don't know, these years are long. But with a commissioned string quartet by Caroline Shaw, Pulitzer Prize-winning composer. So again, investing in women and investing in commissioned work. You want to say anything about that?
It's actually 2 string quartets by Caroline Shaw. And Pam it has a completely different style from Martha's, which is what we want. When we commission new work, we want something that's wildly different. I don't want anything that's Graham-esque. I have plenty of Graham. Which is why we choose these themes, like the Eve Project, because I can have a choreographer with a completely different voice than Martha's, but we're all talking about under the same umbrella, if you will. For this piece, Pam came to our archives. When I first talked to her about this commission, I said, you know, we have a number of Graham dances that aren't very good, but that have really good stuff in them. And would you be interested in looking at some of them? She said, you bet. She came to our archives and looked at some videos of different Graham dances that we don't bring back to life very often, and chose phrases from 3 of them. Before she arrived for rehearsal, our dancers all learned all of the movement. Whether it was a solo for a woman or a duet for a man and woman, the men and the women learned that whole solo, women and women learned the duet, men and, you know, everybody learned everything. And when Pam showed up, she began manipulating that movement, asking them to do it backwards, asking them to do it, you know, facing each other, or she just mixed it up completely, and wove it into her own choreography. So the choreography for this work is not all a mashed up Graham. It's pieces that she borrowed. It was really interesting for our dancers and for me to watch, because one of the things she did to the Graham movement was to strip it of its emotion. When a Graham dancer does a movement, because they're so practiced at it, it immediately becomes dramatic. So there's a movement like this that in the Graham world, it's angsty, right? But Pam is using it like this. Clean, just a movement. And you can all imagine if it's got emotion or wit or whatever in it. So she stripped the Graham moves of their emotion, used them just as design material, and you'll see the result. It's quite cool, dry, witty. The dancers on stage are not Graham characters, they are themselves, which I find really interesting to see them just being themselves on stage.
And the music, the quartet, is a very challenging score, and our musicians have worked very, very hard on this piece. So I know you'll enjoy that as well. There is one piece on the program tonight that is not accompanied by live musicians, and it's kind of a project in and of itself. Quite famously, Lamentation has variations now.
Right. Well, similar to our 19 poses in a way, this was another creative project. This one was sort of an accident. We, in 2007, we had an opening night in New York City on the anniversary of 9/11, and we wanted to commemorate the date. So we asked 3 friends, young choreographers, if they would do a one-night-only thing for us. I said, you know, just spew out a choreographic reaction to this film of Martha dancing Lamentation, her solo in the tube of fabric. If you haven't seen it, you've probably seen pictures of her in that tube. And we said, look, it's one night only. Each of you, you can have 10 hours of rehearsal. Keep it under 4 minutes, because that's how long the solo is. Public domain music or silence, no sets, no props, simple dancewear costumes. You can use any number of dancers in the company that you want. And on that opening night, it was Richard Move, Azure Barton, and Larry Kegwin. And it was so beautiful. We had these 3 gems of contemporary dance that were totally organically tied to our legacy. And of course, we immediately started performing them all over the world. And we started commissioning more. We're up to 15 variations at this point. And tonight you'll see the film of Martha, and you'll see one of the originals, the one by Azure Barton, one by Liz Gehring that she did in 2015, and one by Michelle Dorrance, also she did in 2015.
Does anyone have any questions for Janet?
Yeah, you spoke to this question a little bit with respect to Tanowitz and Lamentations. Given that there's such a demand for the original groove from the 30s and so forth, tell us about the challenge of taking the Martha Rand Dance Company into the 21st century and making it new?
Well, our decision to go with audience access. I mean, the Graham Company had always been kind of goddess-centric. There was the goddess on the mountain, and everybody came to her. Without Martha, it took us a little while to ask the question, who are we going to be without Martha? We realized we had to totally do a 180 and get down off the mountain. So that's what our audience access activities have all been about, from the Lamentation variations to our Google residency to our Clytemnestra Remash challenge on YouTube, and the spoken introduction you'll hear tonight, and the commissioning of new work, et cetera, has really opened the door, and that was our point, to so many different types of audiences, people that come to Graham for different reasons, whether it's thematic, they're interested in the Eve project, whether they're here because of the live music aspect, whether they are other themes. We've done the political dance project or the modernism project, that sort of thing. So it's really refreshed Martha's image. People are looking at her anew. And we also, I think, are riding on the wave of the general interest now in mid-century modern. The design within reach furniture stores, Mad Men on TV. There's just, now that we're 20 years into the 21st century, we have more context and perspective on the 20th. And Martha is benefiting from that. It's no longer just old stuff. It's the classic genius of 20th century modernism.
I think Martha would be happy to find herself in this mid-20th century modern facade and drapery. We're well matched, I think. Anybody else have any questions before Jenna has to run backstage to be with the company? Okay. Well, we're happy we're all here, and we look forward to sharing this beautiful evening with you. Janet, thank you so much for the stewardship of this great company. It's been wonderful. Congratulations.